loud. Okay, good morning, Professor Tootle.
Good morning.
Are you excited to have an earlier show? It seems like you'd be sleeping in California.
No, not sleeping, but I would be in the pool right now. I should
Oh,
be swimming laps. Yeah.
your outdoor pool in your backyard.
No, no, I usually go to the gym.
Yeah.
At this moment, I should be actually, like I've just dropped my son off and then I'm heading to the gym or I'm just getting in the water.
Okay, so if you're already dropped your son off.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. But when Bart and I come out to visit for a public policy discussion, we want to have meetings in your backyard pool. We don't want to be going to the gym.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Jake, you're invited too.
At the
Okay.
Stephen Mott Knott Memorial, guest room back there, you guys can have your meetings in the hot
Wait,
tub.
Professor Knott's been there, but I haven't.
Yeah, that's why we always joke that that's the room named after him.
Gosh, I hate that. I need to go. All right, so Professor, enough on personal life things because no one really has personal life things as humans. They all care about politics every day. That's what we have to post on like 5 or 10 times a day. And we figure if we rant on Facebook, then we know our society's better somehow, right?
No.
Well, okay. But so you mean there's more to life than politics and CNN and MSNBC and
Yeah, for
Fox
most
News?
people. I mean, I remember that Democratic strategist on a podcast I listened to a few weeks ago saying that if you've thought about politics at all in the last 2 years, you're not the median voter.
2 years. God,
And,
you think there's data behind that? By the way, I had a nice
Yeah,
article.
yeah. I mean, this is the guy who does all of their internal polling, So
So the
the
average American just simply does not think about politics month after month. They don't watch
no,
the news. They don't write a blog. They don't go to
no.
some political meeting. Or how about all these protests? There's been a bunch of people going to protests.
Yeah, well, but never forget. I mean, another stat that I always thought was like really stuck out to me was we think of the 1960s as being this time of protest, but
Yeah.
less than 1/2 of 1% of college students in the 1960s ever attended a single protest.
Oh, and that's college students. So it would be
Yeah.
way less among general
Yeah.
population.
So, like, if you want to know what life was like for college students in the 1960s, remind yourself that 99.5% of them never went to a single protest.
Wow. Okay, I'm glad we kind of talked about it from this setting. So that's helpful. Let's get to the cause of the day, though.
Yeah.
I do have an underlying, not philosophical, but an umbrella issue that I'd like you to address up the front.
Okay.
And it's the way I phrased the question. It's what should Americans solve problems on together? What are the top 5 problems Americans should work together in solving or working towards? But I used Americans intentionally rather than people or humans. And I kind of want to know from your perspective, both current and historically, if there is a difference on Americans. I mean, should we, as a subspecies, are we a subspecies? As a part of the human species, I hope we're not a subspecies. Should we be thinking about all these big national and worldwide issues slightly different, or do we actually, the average Chilean or I don't know, Czechoslovakian or Czech Republic now, do they think through? I mean, maybe Western Europe, some of those folks do, maybe Canadians do, but is there a difference between Americans, or should there be? Can you give an
Uh,
overview on that?
yeah, I guess there should be a difference, and Americans should be working on it. The difference should be that we have to remember we're supposed to still have a special obligation to the world to prove that human beings can live at peace with one another. So that's probably the most important uh, like obligation that Americans should feel that might be different than
But if you've
anyone.
never heard these podcast discussions with us before, was that anointed by God? Is it Lady on a
No,
Lake?
no, no, no. Well, I mean, I guess for certain religious people you would say, but it seems to have been reserved is the phrase in Federalist One and how it was repeated by politicians. In other words, uh, we don't need to we don't know the theology behind it exactly, but it seems to have been reserved to the people of this country that we're here to decide whether human beings can govern themselves or not. And so we have a different obligation to the world than everybody else. But should we have that and feel that obligation and understand that we have a sort of civic duty? Yes, we should. But your other question was, do we? And the answer is no.
Yeah, right. But are you telling me, Professor, that if I'm a citizen of Saudi Arabia or Russia or North Korea, that they're not governing themselves?
Well, no, because they're under the authority of arbitrary violence, and that's why um, we don't hold them to. You know, if somebody's got a gun to your head, you can't engage in politics. You have to be free in order to do good, and so I don't have any like animosity towards anyone who is living under
Threat of
arbitrary
violence.
times. Yeah.
Um, do you give any credence? It didn't make my top list of top 12, but do you give any credence to my more liberal friends that are believe that there isn't a distinction, that we live under a threat of violence in America today? It's just under a different sort. It's an oligarch, or it's now the Trump administration, or that we really don't have freedom of choice. We're beholden to the man or the corporation we have to work for, or blah blah blah. Do you give any credence to that? Do you give a head nod, or
No.
no?
No.
Zero.
Zero.
Because they can just move to a different state or a different job or found a job or go to school or study at home, or I mean, they can do all sorts of stuff, but they're
I
not
just
forced to do it.
for all these like big moral questions that we would say for human beings, or my question is, you always have to put a question like that into context, and that doesn't mean that there aren't people in America who are under the threat of violence, either from spouses or you know gangs or I mean, there are certainly communities of people and individuals who are struggling, and I don't mean to imply that there aren't, but you have to say compared to the rest of the world and compared to all of human history, the answer is no. So I just mean we have to
They
put
have
the
more freedom of choice, even though it's unpleasant. It's very difficult. They do have some option to get the hell out of whatever circumstance there is and do something else with their life.
Yeah. So when I answer a question like that and I just say no, I just want you
Yeah,
to
yeah.
know I'm always just putting I'm putting it in some sort of like global context, and I'm putting it in some kind of historical context. So
Well,
I'm
and I
I'm
don't
saying
mean
that compared to what
yeah.
would be reasonable for a human being to expect, and the word reasonable would be based on, what's it like in the rest of the world and what's it been like for most of human history.
So I don't know if you ever pay attention to my Facebook posts. I don't think you usually like them or comment on them. So I have no idea whether you see some or many or all or none.
I mean, I
Uh,
feel like I see some, and I feel like I like some.
Oh, well, you might like some. Well, would it surprise you that almost every day I either directly or indirectly get accused of having white male privilege?
I mean, no, that doesn't surprise me.
So from my liberal friends, they'd go, "What is John interviewing this white guy professor again? He is so damn privileged that he has no idea what it's like to be an average American, because don't have choices." I mean, so I know you've given a nod first, no, and now you've explained it in context, both in America and compared to other nations and historically. But they still probably think you're delusional, and I don't
Mhm.
know what delusional is, but they think you have privilege, and you just don't know. Any
Uh,
nod back to them?
yeah, I mean, I guess I would just maybe have Jake look up James Weldon Johnson Credo. And for anybody who's new to the show, I would just say, like, this is how I've always viewed um, the importance of um, um, maintaining autonomy over yourself.
Love that. Are
Um,
you gonna wait for the read, or we wanna
yeah, I
do
don't
that?
know. Should we, Jake, have you found it yet? Just look up James Weldon Johnson Credo, and it should pop right up, and then we'll let you read it if you want. It starts with
Okay.
I will not.
You will not what?
Oh, I will not allow 1 million or 100 million people to black. This is from memory, so I'm
Okay, yeah,
probably
sure.
missing this up. To 1 million or 100 million prejudiced people to blight my life. And then uh, I will not allow prejudice and its attendant humiliations to bear me down to spiritual defeat. And then he says, my inner life is mine, and I shall guard and defend it against all the powers of hell. And
Yeah,
it's
that's delightful. I think that's probably fairly accurate, isn't it? If your memory is correct.
yeah, well, I hope so.
Yeah. So, Professor,
But
is that a unique human trait, or is that a unique American and American-esque trait?
um, I don't. That's a good question. Is it a unique human trait? I think it's unique. It's a unique human um, uh, positive
Aspiration.
good and desire.
Yeah.
How about
Yeah,
that?
but
It's
my
something
question,
human being.
do people even have that though, Professor? Like if you're just from, but I've been to the Amazon, do those folks have that feeling of confidence that they're not oppressed and they're going to make a go of it in the world? Or are they just kind of like in the survival mode and they have joy? I mean, it's not like they're sitting there oppressed all day long, but
Well, I mean, it- it's not so much that this is a guarantee that you won't be oppressed. It's that you need to constantly work towards not letting your enemies define who you are. How about
well,
let me see how close I came. Jake posted it. I will not allow one prejudiced person or 1 million or 100 million to blight my life. I will not let prejudice or any of its attendant humiliations and injustices bear me down to spiritual defeat. My inner life is mine, and I shall defend and maintain its integrity against all the powers of hell.
yeah, you got it like 99.9%.
Yeah,
Just
not
one
bad.
word.
I know I haven't even had my first cup of tea yet, so.
Yeah, impressive. Okay, so now let's go to the topic of the day. There is a context that Americans should have about a high expectation on ourselves and as a society to be I don't know, a spotlight or a light, an emblem of freedom in the world.
Shining city on a hill, maybe?
Yeah,
Yeah.
shining city on a hill. Thank you,
We
Reagan.
shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us.
Love that. Is that Reagan too? Is that the
Well,
expanded?
the Reagan messed up the quote. The original quote was, "We shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us."
Is that
And
from the Bible?
Reagan added the shining.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
what's the original quote from?
Model of Christian Charity, a sermon
Huh,
of John Winthrop.
lovely. Wow. Cool. I learned something. Thank you. Okay. So we should have it, but we generally don't because we're human. And so we get mired in the muck of normal daily life and animosity and families and subfamilies. And yeah, we're
Yeah,
humans. Okay. So if saying that we want to do better, you and I have put a plant and planted a flag in the soil of America today and say, let's do better, Americans. And here's our
yeah.
American flag 50 stars and 13 stripes. Hooray. And the top we're just going to declare this because we're an autocracy. We're going to demand that Americans do the following out of my list of 12, and you can add some yourself, or you can add another 12. I don't care.
I thought we were limited to 5.
Yeah, we're going to narrow it down to
Oh,
5.
okay. All right.
Okay. So the rest of the conversation, we're going to do this in like 15 minutes and then open it up to Q&A. We're
Okay.
going to identify my 12, and I wrote this down in like 5 minutes. So it's not
Okay.
authoritative. It's just my first off the top of my head 12. Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Energy policy. We should have a safe, affordable, reliable energy policy in the United States. And yes, we should expand nuclear in a huge way and do all the above. Let's have a cohesive, long term, century long plan on
Hey,
energy policy.
John, what you see what's number 2 on my list?
Energy policy?
It says nuclear power.
Yeah, nuclear. So would that make sense if we would kind of like work together, Republicans and Democrats,
Yeah.
liberals and conservatives, figure out a way who's opposed to safe, who's opposed to affordable, who's opposed to reliable. We should have the full mix. If you're into solar and wind, great. If you want nuclear, we should figure that out. If we want to do some fossil fuels, we should be a dominant world power because we have all the above in energy policy in a long-term comprehensive way, not like the next quarterly stock earning report.
Yep, we need to go and dig up the report that Dick Cheney made pre-September 11th and implement the energy policy from the first Bush administration.
Interesting. I don't know if I've ever read that. So thanks.
Oh,
Jake will pull that up. So that'll be excellent. So you agree on number one. And by
yep,
the way, these are in no order. So I just wrote
yeah,
energy policy as
but it
number
happened
one.
to be the second thing I wrote down.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Cool. You prepared. This is the first time you've ever
Well,
prepared.
just when I saw the title, when I pulled up the Zoom link, I started writing, and that
Yeah,
was
but I
just,
sent that out at 5 this morning. You were sleeping.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
Okay. Ready for my number two?
Yeah,
We should discourage wars terrorism and genocide, and prepared to win them when necessary. Now, I go back to conversations you've had. Is it in our national interest, and is it a just calling? And so I adopt your caveats of why we should be
Okay.
involved. What are your two caveats?
Ideals and interests. That
Yeah.
it has to be in keeping with American ideals and in keeping with American interests. And if we don't, then we don't do it.
So is that a worthwhile thing, or do we give a damn if there's millions of people here and there killing each other wantonly and there's just chaos throughout the world?
Well, we always give a damn, but we should always ask, is this something that could be accomplished better by regional allies and partners?
Love that. I'll accept that as well. But a goal is we should discourage violence and killing and genocide and terrorism throughout the world
Yeah,
whenever rationally possible.
which is the flip side of that coin is incentivize peace through trade.
Love that. That's even better, but I think I have that in a third one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm not saying that's your number two now, but is that a valid thing for us to
Yep.
try to rally around? Okay.
Yeah.
Number three, expand the cause of freedom internally within America. And I mean, what I mean that by federalism, by the way. If some subgroup of society wants to do something I don't appeal to or interested in, I generally want to have them do it and I'll move somewhere else. Or, let's have a bunch of different little experiments in democracy. Expand the cause of freedom internally and externally, peace by consent and voluntary exchange of goods and ideas. We should be rallying around that peace by consent and voluntary exchange of goods and ideas. Is that
Sounds
legit?
Yeah, it sounds like you use bigger words than I would use, but
What are your smaller words?
oh, how would I put that? Uh, like follow the rules, you know, like learn the rules and follow them.
Learn and follow. Okay, that's interesting. Learn and follow rules. A lot of us don't give a darn about that much anymore. That's a really interesting point.
Yeah, you
Learn
have to be
the
committed
rules.
to the rules. Or to get back to Abraham Lincoln, you have to understand, and some of the stuff's fresh in my mind because I just taught it last week, but the difference between the things that are necessary and the things that are sufficient for the success of America. And the Constitution is necessary but not sufficient. You have to adhere to a system of rule of law and be committed to the peaceful resolution of your differences.
And that's culturally, not just the law in of itself. The people have to understand it enough to abide by it.
Well, the other thing Lincoln says is, but that's not the primary cause of our great prosperity. The primary cause of our great prosperity is that we all have to feel and understand liberty to all, liberty to other people. So culturally, we have to be, as individuals committed to the principle of liberty, not for ourselves, but liberty for everybody. So that's the cultural part. But what that translates to is a commitment to rule of law in public.
That's good stuff. I may have to try to go back to that, whatever time we are in the show. But we got to keep moving.
Okay.
4, have Congress pass a comprehensive immigration reform bill. Professor, I think there's a time right now, especially when President Trump has said that he thinks we should protect dreamers. And then just last night, and I'm not sure what this means, but he said all the hotel workers and farm workers, immigrants, they should stay because they're doing good work in the farms and hotels. So now I have zero idea what America's current immigration policy is. So, what a great opportunity for us all to rally forward and say what we're interested in. One of my causes is protecting dreamers. You may have some other cause. Maybe it's a more broader than that. But other people have their own cause. Maybe they want the open borders completely. I don't know. But it seems like this would be a good time to coalesce and express our will to our Congress people and have them pass a law and have the president sign it. And then we all know, so we have certainty. Because that's one of the strengths of America, isn't it? Is certainty, so we can plan.
Well, I was thinking about this as you were talking that, I've been lucky enough to know a couple of congressmen over the years. And one of the things that they always, and not just congressmen, but staffers, and I'm sure you know people like this, and Bart does too, and Jake probably. But one of the things they say is like, once you are in the fight, you don't really have time to think about what you're doing. And they always appreciate taking some time to think about, why am I doing this? And so I think, what's this like for a normal person at home? And before we start saying, here's what I want in terms of immigration or energy or tax, I think I'd throw taxes in there too.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to that.
Yeah, but I would just say, what do I think immigration is for? What's it for? And then, instead of reasoning from my priors or my prejudices, really start going back to first principles and think about, what do I think immigration is for? What do I really think taxation is for? Is it because then it helps you answer some questions that will come up later, because I'll take it out of immigration, move it to taxes. If you think that the purpose of taxation is to raise revenue for the government, well, then later on, when somebody suggests, well, what we should do is, tax people I don't like and give tax breaks to people who I do like, then you say, you know what, we already said that you don't think that really that's what taxation is for. We're all agreed that the purpose of taxation is to raise revenue. And the same goes for immigration policy. You say, what is immigration policy for? First decide that you don't think America should be a prison, and then you say, okay, who is it who thinks that America should be a prison, a two-way prison? No one gets in, no one gets out, or a one-way prison. We let people out, but we don't let anybody in. And you say, okay, well, I only want this to be a room full of people who agree that some immigration is going to be allowed because we don't want America to be. So right off the bat, you get people to agree that, well, we're going to let some people in, so we actually agree on this. Now let's start talking about priorities for who we let in. And then we start thinking about what's practical. How do we let people in? And you can work on all that stuff before you get to the part where you disagree.
I think this is excellent.
If you start from your original premise, and then I sometimes I think maybe we should invite him on the show. I have the old history professor. He's retired, but he was a Democratic activist, and we used to go around and do talks together all the time. And people were shocked at what we agreed on, because when we would talk about any issue, we would always start with, what are the premises that we both agree on? And then by the time we got to the differences, you were just in a different mindset, because you'd realize we agree on 99% of this. And what we're talking about is a few things on the margins that we disagree on. And then we were willing to sort of compromise and barter on those, now what look like marginal issues, instead of we're not going to do anything unless kinds of issues.
And your point by this, even though you brought it up under immigration, then switched to tax, is it's really on every issue we could choose to collaborate instead of be opposed to each other out of the gate.
But I think it's important to just, on every single issue, ask yourself, what are my first principles on this issue? Like, what is this for? And you said, like, am I surprised that people tell you you're you have white privilege? Or am I surprised that if we both come out and say we're for nuclear power, that people are going to be like, oh, you're crazy? No, I'm not surprised by that at all. But I think that on most issues, if you just say, like, what is energy policy for? What's the goal here? And then you simply say, hey, look, I get it. You don't think there should be any more energy generation in the United States, but this is a room full of people who believe that the United States of America should have energy.
Safe, affordable, reliable.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's so that you're only excluding, you're not letting extremists keep dragging you into this argument that's preventing the other 98, 99.5% of Americans
So
from
you're
getting this
saying,
policy.
I didn't know you'd be giving a philosophical campaign course, but if you're saying any candidate, Democratic or Republican, were to listen to this part of the conversation, they would run a better, more effective campaign that would appeal to more constituents and they'd have a better chance of getting elected.
Well, the downside is that politics and governing are often at odds with one another because the politician who does this and says they're going to do it is often the person who's not going to get elected. But I'm talking about governing.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not,
That's the important distinction.
I
Different
don't know that
social.
you could actually win public office
Okay.
saying this stuff,
I
but I'm
think
just
you
saying
can. My instinct says you can, but let's do that on another show.
you
I'll
can, but it's a lot more work,
a
right? You have
lot
to,
more work. You know,
you're,
old school work. Yeah.
because you're going to have to fight like David Valadao, not like Matt Gaetz.
Yeah. Old school work. I agree.
Yeah,
I
you
think
have
we're
to
on the
go
same
out
page.
and explain your political positions to every single voter. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, and that's what we should get back to, by the way. Different show, though. I
Yeah.
have, like, 6 more, and I'm
Oh,
out of
sorry.
time. All
Yeah.
right, ready?
Yep.
This is a weird one. I almost feel woo-woo on this. I should probably even not say it out loud. Nurture the human spirit, our full creative explorer selves. How do we get people motivated to be a human and American again? You know, how do and man, a lot of them are, but it seems like we're in a little bit of a malaise,
No,
or a lot of
yeah,
people.
no, I mean, I have that on my list too. I put church, exercise, motorcycle.
Okay, yeah, yours practical implementation of my philosophical. Church, motorcycle, and what, exercise?
Yeah.
That's funny. Motorcycle and exercise. So you like that one?
Yep. It was
Okay.
on my list too. Yeah.
We've got to do a better job figuring out technology, AI, constitutional right of privacy, doxing, targeting I think I think we're about at the stage where it's going to start happening that there will be individual boycotts. They'll take, and that's already happened with the assassination of the CEO of United Healthcare Group or whatever. But I mean, I think they'll go, oh, that person's has a gun owner, or that person's gay, or that person's hates cats. I mean, every imaginable issue, they'll just say, we're going to boycott that person and try to have them lose their job or their career or their reputation and just get them to be silent and keep their heads down on all sides. I think the technology's about there where you could do AI scans of people's Facebook posts and then figure out a targeted campaign to make them look really bad. I think we need to figure this out as a society, or we're going to be in trouble because no one will want to ever participate in the civic dialogue anymore. And a lot of people's heads are down now. I think it's possible that everybody's heads will be down because of technology. Think I'm a fear monger or a conspiracy theorist? What's your reaction to number 6?
No, I mean, I think it comes down to where human beings can only process information that comes from the humanities, but understand that we live in a social science world where people are constantly trying to tell us and manipulate us as groups. But that's why I think it's even more important to say I'm going to be like James Weldon Johnson,
Love that.
and I'm going to defend and maintain my inner and spiritual life, and defend and maintain its integrity against all the powers of hell.
Okay, love that. And AI be damned. Okay, and I don't know if you've accepted my number 6 or not. Okay, number 7, deficit and debt plan. We really have to do a better job on this. Trump seems to be trying, kind of, but Congress is
No,
not. Yeah,
reject that.
I mean, we're firing a bunch of people. It would seem like common sense. If you fire a bunch of people, you'd save some money. I just don't think we've got a long-term plan as a culture, as an American people, to actually get on a better path than we're currently on. Because I think it's potentially the death of America if we don't, and every other country too. But we've got to figure this deficit spending and debt problem out as a people. Agree or disagree?
Agree, but Trump, like many politicians, well, actually, he's unlike many politicians, because you could say that when Obama or Clinton was doing this kind of thing, they were doing it because they were intentionally manipulating the American people. But Trump's doing it because he's dumb and he genuinely doesn't understand. But the fact that people do not understand scale is something that politicians, if they're smart, or devious, I guess maybe is the word I'd use other than smart. If you're devious, you can understand, you can manipulate people who don't know the difference between a million, a billion, and a trillion, or if you're dumb, you just genuinely don't know the difference between a million, a billion, and a trillion. And putting information into its proper context is something that I wish we could better rely on our media and educational institutions. But that's a long.
Okay. But we've got to do something better. We're in agreement. That should make every American's list.
Yeah. I mean, we have to do something about Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. We have to.
Yeah. Otherwise, we're just lying. We're just not.
Everything else is around here.
Right. All those firings are almost a distraction, is your point. It's sure they're real people, but it's not.
Everything Trump has done with Doge is, less than what I'm guessing, but it's less than what the interest on our debt that has gone up in the last 5 years, I bet.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Okay, number 8, a fair tax policy for competitiveness, worldwide competitiveness and fairness. So we already talked about that. You brought it under immigration. So we're on the same page of a fair tax policy.
Yeah, and rethink of what do we think taxes are for?
Yeah, love that one. What are they for? Only 4 more.
All right.
Avoid threats of violence, fear of violence, and retribution. How to put in systems that allow people to be free. We already have it. We figure that out. If somebody makes a threat against you, they go to jail. I mean, we're a pretty safe society, maybe. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's always the thing that tends to happen is that people tend to break the rules in the other direction. So it becomes frustrating because, I would love it if, and I don't know if this is just a natural tendency among like administrators who are just risk averse in all things, but they tend to say, I mean, the crude application in policy just seems like it's whips our neck around. It happens so fast, but we'll go from we need to protect Jewish students who would like to go to class, and you're not allowed to shut down a campus and prevent free speech and free association of others, to just sort of making up some set of rules that destroys free speech and free association. It's like we always seem to think that the opposite of something is the solution rather than we misunderstand what the opposite of something is, so we end up doing the same thing in a different direction.
Yeah, that's really insightful.
I think it's part of this, like one of the things that I thought was really great about that, at least the conversation around the myth of left and right book, is how bad the metaphor of putting your political beliefs on a line, how bad that has been for politics. And I think there was a book about evolution called The Tangled Tree, and it was just about how the bad metaphor of a tree led to so much bad science and bad public policy. And I would say one of the things that is just destroying public life, and has been, is somehow measuring human beings on a line that goes from the left to the right. It just, because you start to think that if somebody says we must oppress Jewish students, you're like, that's wrong. Well, and that the answer is we must oppress Islamic students, and you're just like, what? Like, no, how about if we don't oppress anyone? But it's like this linear binary thinking that comes from the application of that metaphor to public life. I despise it.
So for new listeners that watch this on Spotify or YouTube, that was the Lewis brothers, friends of Professor Tootle, and we've interviewed them live here on the show. And you can buy their book on Amazon, The Myth of Left and Right. Professor, because of you and that book, I now rarely, if ever, use left or right now. I make it more distinguishing because I think you're actually right. It took me a year or two to have you convince me. I'm a slow learner. But thanks for bringing that up again.
Well, okay. I still use the term if somebody's an actual communist, by all means.
Oh, exactly. If they're a fascist, or a
Yeah,
communist.
if you're someone who believes in monarchy, then absolutely, I'm gonna say that you're on the right. Way to
I'm
go.
on the and I actually am starting to correct people on that, and they think I'm like an academic or something.
Yeah.
But agreed. Well done. 10. We don't need to talk about this much because I'm out of time. Cybersecurity. I think we're vulnerable from foreign actors and gangs, and all of a sudden we could have our bank accounts wiped out, and we don't even know who took it, and we're wondering how to pay the mortgage. I think we,
Okay.
as a society, really need to think through cybersecurity. Agree or
Yeah.
disagree?
Sure. I
Oh,
agree.
oh, you see, you don't care.
No, I do agree. It's like if you asked me top what five, and I was like, well, I know
Yeah.
this is gonna make my top five.
I've got my last two.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need a complete education overhaul now. I've decided we need to. You and our high school teacher Jake have convinced me that something's happened in the last decade I'm unaware of, and I don't think you're crazy conservative people. You are well, you're not crazy conservative, but you are conservative. But I think you really care, and I think our system, parents and kids and expectations. I think we're trying to do it. To your point, what is the purpose of education? Maybe we should agree
Yeah.
on that. Do we want to learn something, or do we want to get a test score that gets us in some college or something? We should revamp this in society and figure out what the value of
Yep.
education is.
Learning rather than credentialism. Yep.
Yeah. So I think that should be something that I think maybe that transcends left and right, or not left and right, conservatives and liberals, or Republicans and Democrats. I think there'd be a lot of people that want to do the best for their kids, have them have a nice, happy, successful life because they've learned stuff and they can use that information to go do something, or to paint, or to care for their dog. There's all sorts of ways to learn.
Or just have a better life.
Right. Okay. So we agree on that. A complete education reform
Yep.
initiative. Final, I do think we need to handle healthcare in a different way. 55% of Americans, I think the latest number is, but I could be wrong, are on some kind of government healthcare now. Medicaid, Medicare, SSI, and veterans. So we're kind of arguing about the small subset of America that's in the private sector, and even that's challenged by government regulation. That it's not a free market. We really should figure out how to be competitive worldwide in some kind of different healthcare system. Agree or disagree?
Agree. But again, let's start with a conversation of what are our first principles here? First of all, let's decide the difference between health care and health insurance. Because you need insurance against things that are unpredictable, but
Or catastrophic.
but yeah, and health care is something that is in fact predictable because we're all human beings.
We're all human.
All require health care. It shouldn't come as a shock to us that, like it's like I have teeth. I mean, it's so weird we like get this when it comes to your teeth. We know the difference between, I know that I'm going to need my teeth cleaned. But every now and then I have an emergency, and that's the unexpected thing. But just take what we already understand about our teeth and apply it to your whole body.
Love that. Jake, thanks for that number. I think you're wrong. 36% is too low. Medicaid, Medicare, and veterans is way higher than 36%. So let's do some more research on that. It's the first time ever I've called you out and being wrong. You're always right.
I don't know. We'll
He's
see.
wrong. I'll get
Well,
some
you might
facts.
be like, well, hold on. We just need to define our terms. Like, am I on government healthcare because I'm a public sector employee?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah,
That's another 3 million or 4 million. Yeah.
oh, it's gonna be. I mean, yeah.
Oh yeah, you mean like private and like local governments
So
and
even
state?
though I have private health insurance, I am a public sector employee.
I don't know. I'm going to do some research on that, but you do agree that healthcare is an issue that faces all of us, and we should have a good societal mechanism for dealing with that.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Those are my 12. What did I miss? What's on your list?
Let's see. I have supporting media institutions like Fire, Cato, Dispatch, Free Press.
Love that.
Literacy is probably, well, you have learning,
Yeah.
but I'm really concerned. Oh, here's one thing you didn't mention: political deregulation. The deregulation of the political parties. You didn't mention that.
What do you mean? What do you mean? To explain that a little further.
Just making it easier or less complex for people to engage in politics outside of the two political parties.
Yeah, interesting. I haven't given
that
a lot of thought to that. Interesting.
because it's so like in terms of like I think it's absurd how complicated it is to get ballot access.
Yeah.
You
You have to have
know,
a lot of money, huh?
yeah, and it's I mean I would just say uh, if you are someone who would like to make a difference in society, one of the first things you need to do is you need to have, I don't know, $50,000 because you have to have a treasurer and you have to have a lawyer. And the fact that you have to have a treasurer and a lawyer to just keep you out of prison in order to run for office is something I'm opposed.
Prohibitive for most. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that it shouldn't you shouldn't have to risk being put in jail because you're following some obscure law that the two political parties are going to throw at you. You know,
Yeah.
um, let's I don't know, limit the liability under a certain amount. You know, I don't know, but again, I don't have solutions. Yeah, I
Identify
just
the
love to
topic.
be in a room full of people who are thinking about that issue.
Lovely. What else?
That's pretty much it. Everything else I have is on your list.
Okay, so on the back of an envelope, two guys have figured out the top 12. We haven't prioritized the top five. For now, let's leave that for another day because we've gone 45 minutes and I want to open it up to Q&A, if any. And then we can go back to it if we have more time. Is that fair? Or do you want to have a
Yeah, I
concluding?
guess I'd be interested in hearing what Bart and Jake and maybe our guests would add to our list and
Excellent.
before we
And
start narrowing
And
it.
so, folks, you don't have to take yourself off video. You can. It's nice to be able to see you, like you've probably seen us, but you don't have to. But you do have to take yourself off, your mic off or on, because otherwise we can't hear you. Questions, Stephen? You're already on. That doesn't help. Come on, Jake, Bart, Joss, or Jeff.
Jake's off mute. Let's go. Let him say something.
Excellent. Well,
No,
then
you don't have anything.
Bart,
Bart.
All right, I took myself off mute. This was a fantastic conversation. John, it's great you came up with those. How many total
12.
points did you have? That
12.
12. Okay, that's just awesome.
Off the top of my head.
Yeah, yeah. No, just to kind of focus this a little bit on, I don't know, current events, if you will. A question I have for Stephen is yesterday, I think at first I thought to myself, the US Supreme Court threw the Trump administration a curveball because they basically told them, okay, bring this guy back from El Salvador. And I think it's interesting to me because I don't think the Supreme Court actually threw him a curveball. I think the Supreme Court threw him a fastball right down the middle and said, either hit this out of the park or we really are going to have a crisis. They basically said to him, look, you're trying to argue you have no jurisdiction over this guy anymore because he's out of the country, but you're paying another country to keep him. And you're not just paying the other country, you're paying like millions of dollars a month for that country to do this.
Yep.
So get his butt back here.
One other, Bart, because Justice Roberts, Chief Justice, held it for a day himself. He said, hold on, I'm putting a stay on that order of the district court judge. That even made it stronger because they came back with a unanimous decision just several days later. I think it is telling them we're going to have a constitutional crisis unless you do this. Professor.
Yep, agreed. And this would be one of these, this would hit the streets and demand of your political, like if President Trump denies an order of the Supreme Court, that's when you start saying to your elected representatives, like, impeachment, removal from office now.
But he could be a gang member, or he is a gang member.
Yeah, it's irrelevant. Like
he's a vicious criminal.
Yeah, I don't care. I mean, that has nothing to do with it. Like just the idea that they have due process is the principle. It doesn't matter who he is, or
It kind of a fundamental belief. In order to be an American, you kind of need to believe in that, don't you? It's part of our Constitution. It's a fundamental bedrock part of our Constitution.
Yeah, one would hope. But Jake, I don't know if you're going to disagree or.
Oh, I'd love to have Jake disagree. I might get mad at him, but Jake, jump in.
Well, no, I don't disagree, but like to Toodle's point, if Trump's defying the Supreme Court and that should mean impeachment, which I'm totally in agreement with, why are we not impeaching him over not enforcing the TikTok ban?
Well, because it's less of a bright line. In other words, yes, I agree that because there's not because I disagree with you, but just because there is out there some conceivable, reasonable argument that could possibly, if you squint and have a great lawyer, some person who's not completely insane could make an argument that like, because we didn't impeach Biden or Obama for the non-enforcement of laws, I would just say,
yeah, but Professor, that was a pretty slippery slope. You might as well agree with Trump when he said, "Yeah, I think we should investigate whether we can deport U.S. citizens overseas."
I'm still saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that, well, as per our conversation a couple of weeks ago, you got to know where your lines are, and if he issues some sort of a statement that says like, I am not going to enforce a ruling of the Supreme Court, then that's the tripwire. That's
okay. Now, here's why I like this show, because you might have a 10 times better answer than I would have. How many other times in U.S. history has a president directly said no to the U.S. Supreme Court when they have ruled? It's happened a couple times. Do you know what they are? I mean, there may be a variety of nuances, but are there some that we should all be familiar with?
Well, that's what I mean by there have been times when presidents have chosen non-enforcement with some kind of an argument, but when you're talking about just outright defiance in peacetime,
well, I was going all there. I'm talking all.
Well, I know, but here's the thing: like, it's unclear, kind of who's right during wartime. So, because presidents do have broad legal authority during wartime.
Well, but Professor, that's why he made this executive order that we are at war with gangs or criminal drug or whatever they are.
Right, but that is absurd. That to say that, like, that's like saying we're at war with the powers and the principalities of the air. Like, this is not like, I'm not even going to, when people, that's the argument. When you're talking to someone and they make that argument, you just want to say, like, are you doing this with a straight face? Because unless you have a brain that's full of rocks, you don't actually believe the words that are coming out of your own mouth right now.
But Professor, I like challenging you for some reason today.
Yeah.
But we're not all out in the streets over those 280 other people in the prison, and they were all deported because of that order that we were at war, and so he has extraterritorial powers and can do whatever he wants in immigration because it's in war. And
there's also kind of like fog of war, fog of Trump. In other words, there's so many. When he commits so many horrible things at once, it's often hard to focus on one. And that's why I say, like, we have to wait for these instances when it has gone all the way through all of the processes, when we do have some sort of authoritative understanding of all of the legal issues that have come through, and it's made its way all the way to the Supreme Court. Like,
and they've ruled 9-0 in this case, which
right. That's what I mean. You want to make your strongest possible case. You want it to be undeniable. You want it to be rock solid. And so I'm not saying that out of those other 280 instances, we aren't going to find 280 more things that are just as egregious. I'm just saying, we know that this one
Right.
has
Okay,
been
fair enough.
adjudicated. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough for today. Bart, did that help you, or do you have a follow-up?
Jake's got something else, I think.
Yeah, I think Jake wanted to jump in.
Okay, Jake.
Well, if we're talking about like past precedent for, justifying whatever Trump's doing, I mean, if you're saying, I mean, I completely agree that he should be impeached for many things, including the Kilmar Garcia incident. But couldn't he make the argument, well, Obama killed Abdurrahman
Yep.
al-Awlaki, that 16-year-old kid in Yemen? Like, he killed a U.S. citizen in a country where we weren't at war with them, and nothing happened to him. So I can deport Garcia to a prison. I'm not killing him. He's still alive, and I'm keeping America safer.
Well, I think that's important for, remembering the sort of hypocrisy. And thank you for mentioning that, but there is a difference. And this is why I said, I essentially want to always err on the side of caution, so that I'm not the person running around saying impeach him for this, impeach him for that. Like, again, I'm not sure I agree with the Obama administration. I just know that there is a non-absurd argument that what Obama did was legal and justified.
Because he's engaged.
I agree with it, but there is a reasonable argument out there that disagrees with me and disagrees with Jake probably. But my point is like that if I want it to only move when something is just undeniable, and I would say, by the way, I don't think Trump should be impeached now. I think he should be impeached and removed from office if he denies an order of the Supreme Court.
Right.
That's that. So I'm even gonna give him a chance to follow court orders,
Sure.
and
Well,
undo
that's
it.
our system. Yeah, no, they've ordered him to do it, and he should do it, or otherwise there's going to be consequences.
Yeah.
You think that would actually happen?
No.
Agreed. We should talk
Unless he actually, I mean, if he had gone, it's fun. This is the sad part. If he had continued to tank the American economy and caused a global depression and
that might still happen. You don't think that might still happen?
well, I don't know. I think he's starting to realize that if he just destroys the economy of the United States, that there will be political consequences even for him. Because, I mean, even remembering like Richard Nixon, why he would have been convicted, you only get convicted and removed from office if people from your own party abandon you. And if Donald Trump were to
on tariffs, there's a ton of conservatives and Republicans that do not like tariffs. They think it's a tax.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, and let's see if they can recover their spines. But I'm saying if we saw unemployment hit 8%,
yeah,
then Trump would be impeached and removed from office for denying a Supreme Court order, even though those things are completely unrelated.
In practicality of real American politics, yeah, you're probably right. Okay, next question. I assume that was good, Bart and Jake. I really want to hear from Joss if we can, and Jeff, you don't have to, but I really want to hear from Joss. I have a doggo emergency. Damn it. Okay, wait. Does she have something else though?
Yeah, in the chat, she asked about DACA Dreamers. Yeah,
I really feel like DACA and the way Dreamers are being treated, it feels like an injustice on like a Jim Crow level to me. That they're just allowed to stay here, and this weird twilight, not really a citizen, don't have any place else to go. You're just here and you can work and contribute to the economy, but you don't have a voice really. It bothers the heck out of me. And I do think like historically that people will look back on this and be like, what was going on?
So Josh, we have a tiny little project we're working on together. Do you mind just sharing it with the professor and get his reaction?
Oh yeah. So, I think like, especially with immigration, and the way the two parties feel about it, we're almost at a deadlock, in many ways. But I think that like being able to push through basically a quick pathway to citizenship for the dreamers and for the people that were covered by DACA, that should be like a home run, easy, bipartisan thing to do. If everybody can just stop screaming at each other long enough to say, yes, this is one thing that we're going to address, and then start doing it. So I'm trying really hard to kind of get some, well, and John too, because we discussed it. We're trying to get sort of some groundswell grassroots support to get people to start writing their representatives, and instead of going out and protesting in general vague ways, really focusing all that passion on getting citizenship pathways for
You know,
our
it would be
dreamers.
interesting, and this is my suggestion for this project, is that you go back to the legislation that was proposed by the Republicans back
Mhm.
in 2014 or 15, and remember that it was none other than the current CEO of Truth Social, Devin Nunes, who supported that bill. And the original version of it before it was poison pilled, and just say like, let's resuscitate this bill. Like, let's actually solve this problem for the dreamers and then just get on with our lives. And not, if you want to have a sort of, and then challenge Republicans like, hey, this is what you guys were for.
So Professor,
Now, sorry, go ahead, John.
and then you follow right up with it. But Professor, with a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican president, and there'd be a ton of Democrats that how would they vote against a pathway to citizenship for dreamers? I mean, this should pass overwhelmingly. There are about 5 to 10% of American society that just have no empathy for these folks, and I think they're just being mean spirited. I think they'd even come around. Can you? Couldn't this just be a no-brainer, easy to pass bill by doing exactly what you said? Dust off that old 2014 Republican plan and say, hey, Republicans, leadership, pass this.
Basically, because Trump hasn't coughed in that direction.
Nobody has. He said he wants the dreamers to have protection, and now he's gone to farmers and hotel workers. So
yeah. So I mean, it's obviously just not a priority. So I would just say, make it a priority. You can get it through next day, and Trump could have an actual signing ceremony instead of
he could take a real claim to fame for caring for people.
Yeah, or whatever. Yeah.
But Josh, your follow-up question.
Oh, one of the things that I am finding, I guess, disheartening is I did feel like this would be just like a knock it out of the park, but I do have, I have friends on all the way across the political spectrum, and several of them are fairly progressive, and they're kind of taking a stance like, well, you have to give it to everybody. Like, they're basically holding the dreamers hostage and saying, if you can't give it to everybody, you can't cherry pick who we're going to give it to. How dare you, just because you think they deserve it. And I'm like, in today's political climate, that's not happening, period, end of sentence.
Well, that's why I would say the challenge is not just because you're going to have, if you're the idea would be, how do we come up with how do we get Democrats to support this bill? Because
that's what's insane to me.
Yeah, because they killed it. They're the ones who killed it the first time.
Yep.
But I think the political climate has changed somewhat for Democrats. I think the calculus for them has changed, because in many ways, a lot of the smarter Democrats are now seeing the last election as a referendum on government. That, hey, people expected us to actually do things and we didn't do them. And that if you could somehow get Democrats to say, we're going to do this because we actually care about accomplishing something rather than just pretending to accomplish something.
Yeah.
And then you can say, well, it has Republican support, it has Democratic support. Why is this bill not passing? You know, and it's funny, once everybody agrees, that stuff just tends to get done.
Yeah.
All right. Josh, I think that's helpful advice from the professor. Anything else on the topic or anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Excellent. Appreciate you calling in. Jeff, last call because we've gone an hour, but oh good, you have taken yourself off. How can we help you? Or how can the professor give you guidance or brainstorm with you?
I don't have any questions. I just appreciate being invited to this and have been listening and learning.
Oh, great.
Excellent. No ripping into the professor. He likes controversy.
Oh, I don't say why.
You know, on a lot of the points, there's a lot of discussion. The nuclear, the power of the parties, all of those things would be things that I'd love to get into in more detail, but there's too many to do here and now.
Excellent. Well, we've done 108 shows. I don't know how many you've signed on to before, but
I've never been invited, so whatever
I'll-
list I need to get on.
yeah, it's Tootle Talks under a Facebook group, or you can communicate with either the professor or me or
Or Spotify, YouTube.
Spotify, YouTube.
Yeah.
Or just reach out by text or email, and you can find it if you don't have it on LinkedIn or Facebook.
All right.
Cool.
Thank
Thanks for calling in. So, Professor, my last question to end up the show, unless somebody else wants to jump in, is this: we've gone through those 12. We open it up for some further question. Now, I'd like you to at least give some historical perspective on what somebody in the founding of our country or in the 1830s or the 1910s, did they have all these same issues? I don't think they did in the same way as healthcare. People just got sick and died. So I'm not sure that was like one of their top 5 issues. They tried to avoid getting hurt really bad, and when they did, they had a tough life.
But there were public health issues. Just getting clean water to people, just getting sewers built. Just getting adequate housing, and all of those things. So there was always a next biggest issue.
Okay.
I think the historical perspective I would put on all of these things is to just in some ways look back and appreciate what we've already accomplished. The reason we've accomplished so much is because every year we try to make things a little bit better, and then we come back the next year and try to make things a little bit better. And some things get worse, and some things stay the same, and some things get better. But our system is kind of designed so that we fail 49 out of 100 times, but we succeed 51 out of 100 times in the next year. And I would say in making things 51% better. It's not that we haven't had all of these problems. These are all problems that have their origin in the human condition. So our political
Professor, what I'm trying to get you to educate us. Educated sounds patriarchal or something, but I want to be educated. If you're a citizen of 100 years ago or 200 years ago or 500 years ago when we're a settler here in America, I think you're more worried about safety than anything else. I think you're worried about getting killed all the time from some invading tribe or some mad neighbor or some criminal element or some vicious king. I mean, there's just all sorts of vicious animal. There's just all sorts of things ready to kill you 500 years ago and 300 years ago. And yes, there's danger today in Denver, Colorado. But it's kind of, I don't know. There is possibility that I could get killed today from some psychopath. But it's compared to through history, it seems like it's less and less and less and less and less. So even though it was one of my 12 topics, it's different psychologically, isn't it, than historical our ancestors?
Yeah. But that's because we have a system that hopefully focuses us on working from big to small. Like you have to handle safety first. But there does come a point at which you have incredibly high costs for almost no advantage. There comes a point where you say, like, we need to make sure that every American is safe. and then you say, well, what are we going to do about bed sheets? Because bed sheets kill, you know, thousands of people every year. And you say, well, we're not going to regulate bed sheets. All right. Like, or, in other words, the cost to society becomes so high to achieve that last little marginal difference of safety. We should say to ourselves, all right, we have some other big problems that we should be focusing on rather than, you know, saving Americans from their sheets.
Well, talk to me about, and I get the ladders and the roofs and sheets and cliffs, and I mean, and car driving. I mean, there's all sorts of dangers in the world. But I think one of the primary reasons President Trump got elected is an unease or a lack of just not knowing what's going on with immigrants, illegal immigrants. And there's at least some. How come no one's enforcing whatever law we have on the books? I don't know the details, but they're driving around. Are they licensed? Are they work? They don't speak English. I'm confused. What's going on? And he says, "I'm going to stop it." And they go, "Good enough for me." And they pull the lever for him. So, what is that human psyche? Is it different, or are we just an animal that goes to Maslow? And boy, if you mess with the safety thing, liberal Democrats, which they do here in Denver, you know, you allow people to just camp outside somebody's home or office, and they go, "What?" And they, you know, is it a core instinct, or are we changing as a species?
Of course. I mean, but it's also, and I would even say it's not even wrong that you say we have this problem of just lawlessness, and we can't actually function as a society with the, you know, institutionalized lawlessness. And so, you know, they feel like they have no choice but to vote for Trump. But you know, in some ways it's well, not in a lot of ways it's the cynical answer that people are left with, which is that if I can't, you know, if the Biden administration and Harris are promising me institutionalized smart lawlessness, then I guess I'm going to pick chaos, because at least somehow that's more honest. You know, that Donald Trump, by being a mixture of dumb and evil, and ignorant,
trying to get conservative votes. You can't keep saying that kind of stuff and get your Republican friends to like you.
Well, I just don't know if there's any way I can say that he's not a stupid person. You know, and with a sort of
richest people in the world. He's one of the most successful elected officials in United States history. How can that be dumb?
Because accidents happen and people get lucky. I mean, there are a lot of people. I mean, just to flip side, you know, Bill Gates acknowledges that if he hadn't been, you know, born with where he was and when he was, he would have not have been a billionaire. You know, it just wouldn't have happened. Like, people do just get lucky, you know. Luck does play a role, especially at people who achieve marginal, you know, and small or success in small areas.
Saying children of kings and queens just got lucky?
I'm absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of the point, and that's what's in the Federalist, right? That we're here to see if we can construct a society that isn't based on accident and force, you know, violence and luck. Or as Monty Python put it, you know, strange women lying in ponds distributing swords is no basis for a system of government, you know. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't see it.
Well, let me ask you this question.
I don't want to be deliberately provocative or mean, but if you're just asking me to describe what I would call this behavior, I'd say, I don't know, it's what a stupid person would do.
Okay, fair enough. Let me ask this question before we conclude here in a minute or two. Conservatives just cannot get it out of their head on their fear, well, and anger more than fear, on Black Lives Matter riots and destroying of vehicles and storefronts and They just can't get it out of their head. They are really mad, and they think it's that lawlessness that you were describing. And Republicans, well, Democrats can't get it out of their head about January 6th, what I believe was an attempted insurrection or a coup, attempted coup. But they cannot get it out of their head, but they can't see the other side's perspective at all. Can you give some sense of that throughout history? Have we always been tribal, where we're just going to view our own positions in the most favorable light and look at the other opponents in the disfavorable light? Is that just a human instinct, or is that something new?
Oh, it's absolutely a human instinct.
We just hate the other tribe.
Well, not just hate the other tribe, but just people are, we're left with, we're all people who are just sort of stumbling through life, doing the best we can. And I think of it this way, like back when I used to install irrigation systems, you'd sometimes be out in the field in the middle of nowhere. And it was like, well, if we had this particular tool, then that would be great. But we don't have it right now. All we have are the tools that are in this truck right now. So I don't have any other way of registering my dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party other than to vote for Trump. It is not a perfect tool. It's just the tool. It's the only tool I have in this truck right now.
Yeah.
And you're going to see the response to that in the midterm elections, and then you're going to see a bunch of Democrats overinterpret those results. Like,
and they screw up the next.
They're all going to be shocked. So here's what's going to happen: is like Republicans. I guess I would be shocked. I mean, I guess it's still possible, but like, it's going to be really hard for Democrats to blow this. They might still find a way.
Yeah, they can.
But people will be left with only one way to show their disapproval, and that's why I think the figure that I would look at more than anything else is unemployment. I know that we're fixated on the stock market and we're fixated on, but when people lose jobs, that's when political change happens. If you see that unemployment figure start to tick up, and see it go 6.5%, you're going to see people voting for whoever is the other person.
You're confident because of Trump's flamboyant, active engagement in every imaginable issue, whether it's political or not, that he and Republicans own whatever happens, good or bad, politically and economically in the midterms. Yeah, can you keep blaming Biden?
No, and no. Americans have an 18-month memory.
Think through this enough. They're just going to be mad.
Yeah, the political memory of the United States is, if you're lucky, at its longest, 18 months. Right?
Okay. All right. And so if we're healthy economically, you're saying that all the crazy stuff that Trump's doing will keep going.
Well, I think I want to be clear that we could still have a fundamentally healthy economy, but I think that the American people will put up with a lot of stuff until they lose their jobs.
Interesting point. I'll think more on that. Okay. We have gone over time. Are you comfortable with today's conversation, or do you have any concluding remarks?
No, I mean, I guess I always want to come back to Bart and see if there's anything.
Bart, last bite at the apple. I usually let the professor have, but Bart, I agree. Bart, you have any concluding kudos, questions, comments?
Yeah. My computer behind me just did something weird, but I'll get back to that. Yeah, not a problem. The only concluding remark that I would make is that what I'm worried about is that the way Trump is going about doing what he's doing, he literally has created a situation where no one can really stop him from doing what he's doing. The only one who can stop him is him. And that kind of scares me. Because I think, like, even the Supreme Court ruling yesterday about the guy in El Salvador, basically the Supreme Court was saying, look, we know we can't make you do this, but the bottom line is you better do it. Well, we're going to see if that has any effect on what they're doing. What worries me is like what's going on with the tariffs. Trump basically tanks the stock market. It's not clear what the effect it was on the economy of all of that. But he tanks the stock market, then he abandons the tariffs and says, "Oh, I'm pausing them for 90 days, except for China, the most important one." Well, the stock market kind of goes, "Oh, okay, we're going to have one really good day, but God, he's taken what is probably our largest trading partner. I mean, numerically it's not, but it's the most important one. And he's still hammering them. We don't like that. So now we're still tanking the market, but what are we doing? This also just seems so futile and stupid."
Yeah, and Bart, let me do a follow-up, and Professor, you can answer both. My concern is that, but also because we're going after education and banks and law firms and anybody knowing anybody in media, or I mean, it's just going on. Anybody that said an unkind word about Trump, and sorry, you've done it like 3 times today, so I'm not sure I want to keep doing this with you. Anybody that has said an unkind word about Trump is like persona non grata, maybe even an enemy. Here's my concern. Not only that, but now when the Democrats take over again, and they will at some point, whether it's 2 years or 4 years or 8 or 16, they will take over again at some point. They're just going to have to get rid of every single federal employee that's been hired in the last 2 or 4 years. I mean, like, they'll be persona non grata. I'm not sure that's healthy for our society to have CDC scientists or USAID, if it gets resurrected, people trying to care for malaria around the world. They have a political agenda. I don't get that. I don't think that's healthy for our society. So you can ask Bert's, mine, neither or both. The end of the show is yours as always.
Oh, no, of course it's not healthy. But the comedian John Mulaney said that electing Donald Trump is like putting a horse in a hospital.
It's a great skit.
And I would say it's even worse than that. It's not just putting him in a hospital, it's putting him in charge of the hospital. And in a weird way, this one of the things that is scary, but also sometimes saves Trump is his own incompetence. The fact that that the people who work for him sometimes just don't know how to do things means that they're done incorrectly and not able to accomplish anything.
And it will get overturned, and then they have to start over, and then they run out of time. Yep.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that they aren't just doing damage wherever the horse, in every single room where I don't know, the horse that's on cocaine, it happens to wander, he's going to be damaging the hospital rooms. But
okay, we're going to end with that. Professor, why don't you ponder the top 5? We don't have to do it next week, but we'll go back to this show at a certain point. I don't know when, but we'll kind of review and maybe go into in depth more on education, etc. And I am still working for a couple challengers for you, by the way, and I won't be hard to do. I think you'll be challenged by a lot of people.
okay.
But we're going to have a show or two on people that want to attack Professor Tootle on his conservative philosophy that apparently is not conservative anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll see.
Sure appreciate your time. All right.
Yeah, have a good one.
Hey, thanks, Bart. And Josh, Jeff, thanks for joining us today. And Jake does a good job as always. Have a great day, you all.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.